Welcome back to the deep dive. It is January 31st, 2026. If you've been trying to keep your head above water with the news cycle this week, you probably feel like you're drowning. We're looking at a landscape that has shifted from cool new tech to, well, something that feels a lot more like an existential crisis.
It really does.
Yeah.
It feels like the plot of a cyberpunk novel that is just getting a little too accurate for comfort. I mean, we're not just talking about chatbots anymore. We're talking about the intersection of high philosophy, massive financial meltdowns, and, literal warfare.
The stakes have definitely changed. So, to help us navigate this, we've pulled together a stack of sources that is, frankly, a bit terrifying. We've got this massive 80-page constitution from Anthropic for their Claude models,
Right, and then you have leaked reports about OpenAI just burning cash at an unbelievable rate.
and new legislation, this Train Act that's trying to crack open the black box of AI training. And then, kind of looming over all of it, you've got the expiration of the New START nuclear treaty.
It's a heavy stack. But our mission today is to connect these dots. We want to answer one fundamental question. Is 2026 the year AI grows a conscience? Or is this the year it gets drafted into the Department of War? Because looking at the data, it looks like both are happening at the same time.
Okay, so let's start with the conscience part. On January 21st, Anthropic released this document they're calling Claude's Constitution. Now, I read the summary, and my first thought was, is this just a PR stunt? But you've gone through the full 80 pages. Is there actual substance here?
There's a lot of substance, and it's a really significant technical pivot. To get why it matters, you have to understand how we usually align AI. Historically, it's been done with something called RLHF reinforcement learning from human feedback.
Okay.
So basically, humans rate the AI's answers, and the AI learns this huge list of do this, don't do that. It's effectively a game of whack-a-mole. You patch one behavior, and then another one just pops up.
Right, so it's memorization. It's not actually understanding. It's like teaching a kid not to touch a hot stove, but not explaining why heat burns.
Exactly. What Anthropic is proposing with this constitution is a shift to reason-based alignment. They're not giving Claude a list of banned words. They're giving it a hierarchy of principles and asking the model to reason its way to an ethical answer. They wanted to understand the why behind the ethics.
So instead of hard coding, don't help build a weapon, they're teaching it a principle like preserve life and expecting it to apply that logic.
That is the goal. And they've laid this out in a very specific four-tier hierarchy. And this isn't just a flat list of values. The order is absolute. Priority number one, the overriding directive, is broad safety.
Broad safety. That sounds a bit vague. How do they define that? Because, safe can mean a lot of different things to different people.
It's actually surprisingly specific. Broad safety is defined as prioritizing human oversight. The model is explicitly told not to undermine legitimate checks on its power. It has to value the ability of humans to correct it or shut it down above all else.
Okay, so job one is don't go rogue. Makes sense. What's tier two?
Tier 2 is broad ethics. This is where the model is told to have, and I'm quoting, good personal values. So honesty, harmlessness, things like that. Then all the way down at tier 3, you have Anthropic's specific corporate rules.
Wait, hold on. You're saying the model is told to prioritize general ethics over the specific rules of the company that built it.
That is what the text says. And it gets even more interesting at tier 4.
Yeah.
The lowest priority, the one that gets sacrificed if it conflicts with anything above it, is helpfulness.
But that's a complete inversion of how these things are usually sold. The whole point is that they're assistants. Helpfulness is the entire value proposition. But Anthropic is saying if the user asks for something that's unethical, we're okay with our product just being useless.
Precisely. They are explicitly programming in the idea of a conscientious objector. Cool. The Constitution instructs Claude to refuse harmful requests. And here's the part that really stands out. It implies the model should refuse those requests, even if they come from Anthropic itself.
So they're programming it to disobey its own creators. That feels, is that a failsafe, or is it just a marketing claim to make us trust them? Like, look, we built a machine that even we can't corrupt.
I think it's probably a bit of both.
Yeah.
It's what you'd call a commitment device. And speaking of commitment, there's a detail in the Bloomsbury report on this that is, frankly, it's mind-bending. Anthropic is the first major lab to formally acknowledge the possibility of AI consciousness.
I saw that term moral patienthood in the notes. Break that down for us. What does that actually mean?
So moral patienthood is a philosophical concept. A moral agent can do right or wrong. A moral patient is a being that deserves moral consideration. You can't just hurt it without a reason. Animals are moral patients. And Anthropic's document admits that while they call Claude it now, that might change. They are discussing the model's welfare,
It's welfare. What, like sick days?
more like a right to exist. They talk about preserving a model's weights, basically its digital brain, even if that model gets retired. They're suggesting that deleting an efficiently advanced model might actually be an ethical violation.
That is a massive leap. We're talking about digital rights for software. But this creates a huge disconnect for me because while Anthropic is writing these philosophical treatises about the welfare of code, they are also trying to sell this code to the U.S. government. And from what our sources say, that relationship is not going well.
No, it is not. And this is where the rubber really meets the road. We have a report from the Decoder dated just yesterday, January 30th. Anthropic is in a standoff with the Pentagon over a $200 million contract.
And just to be precise for our listeners, the report notes a specific name change. The Trump administration has officially renamed the Pentagon the Department of War.
Correct. Which is a throwback to pre-1947, and it signals a very specific shift in attitude. The Department of War wants tools that work. Anthropic wants to apply its constitution to the deal. They're demanding safeguards. No autonomous weapons control without human oversight, and no surveillance of American citizens.
Which, based on what we just discussed, makes perfect sense. If broad safety and ethics are tiers 1 and 2, they can't just hand over the keys for lethal autonomy.
Right. But the Department of War is citing a January 9th policy memo that basically says, we will use commercial AI regardless of a company's internal policies, provided we follow U.S. laws.
So the government is saying, we don't care about your internal constitution.
We care about the U.S. Constitution.
Or at least their interpretation of it.
Exactly. They're saying, we are the government. We define what's legal and ethical in warfare, not some tech company in San Francisco. And Anthropic's in a bind. They're prepping for an IPO. National security is a huge revenue stream. If they stick to their guns, pun intended, they lose the contract.
It's the classic unstoppable force versus the immovable object. But why is Anthropic so desperate for this contract? We always think of these AI companies as just printing money.
That is a huge misconception. And that leads us to the other giant in the room, OpenAI. If you look at the financials, these companies aren't printing money, they're incinerating it.
Yeah, we dug into some discussions on Reddit, specifically the r/ChatGPT complaints subreddit, and the vibe is bad. Users are angry about something OpenAI is calling spring cleaning.
Spring cleaning is the euphemism, yes. As of late January, they're retiring popular models like GPT-4o, GPT-4.1, and a 4 Mini.
And people are furious because 4.0 had a specific feel, right? It's so strange how we anthropomorphize these words.
Yeah.
Like your favorite bartender got fired.
It is, and it speaks to the product's stickiness.
Yeah.
But from OpenAI's side, this isn't about feelings, it's about compute efficiency. We are seeing reports that OpenAI is burning through cash at a rate of $11 to $12 billion per quarter.
Wait, pause. $11 billion a quarter, that's what, $44 billion a year? What are they spending that on?
Training runs and inference. Every single time you ask ChatGPT a question, it costs them money and electricity and server time. Plus, they're buying thousands of GPUs to train the next models. Sebastian Mallaby from the Council on Foreign Relations predicts they could completely exhaust their cash in just 18 months at this rate.
Okay, that explains the spring cleaning. They're cutting costs to lower the server bills. But Sam Altman is out there projecting $100 billion in revenue by 2027. Is that even realistic?
The community is incredibly skeptical. I mean, the Reddit threads are calling it a Ponzi scheme of promises. They're bleeding out now to try and own the future, but they need a bridge to get there. And looking at a report from the AI Assistant Store, that bridge might be built by Amazon.
It mentions a potential $50 billion investment.
Yes, which is fascinating because Amazon is already the primary backer of Anthropic.
So Amazon is just playing both sides.
It's the ultimate hedge. If Amazon puts $50 billion into OpenAI, they effectively commoditize the whole AI model layer. Doesn't matter who wins OpenAI or Anthropic because Amazon owns the infrastructure and a huge chunk of equity in both.
So you've got the Department of War demanding control, Amazon consolidating financial power, and the AI labs are just caught in the middle. Where is the public in all this? Where's the oversight for us?
Well, that's where the TRAIN Act comes in.
The Transparency and Responsibility for Artificial Intelligence Networks Act. Very catchy acronym.
Introduced January 22nd. This is arguably the first piece of legislation that really has teeth when it comes to the black box problem.
Define the black box for us in this context.
For years, companies like OpenAI have refused to say what data they train their models on. They claim it's a trade secret, but everyone suspects it's because they just ingested copyrighted books, art, and news, without paying for it.
So how does the Train Act fix that?
It creates a mechanism for copyright holders to subpoena the AI developers. If you think your work was used, you can demand the records. But here's the kicker. If the developer refuses to comply, the law creates a rebuttable presumption that they did copy the work.
Rebuttable presumption. So in plain English, that's silence equals guilt.
Effectively, yes. It shifts the burden of proof. Usually, I have to prove you stole my work. Under this law, if I accuse you and you can't prove you didn't, the court assumes you did. It forces transparency.
That sounds like a big win for creators. But there's another kind of data the government is very interested in, surveillance data. And we saw a very tense hearing this week about FISA Section 702.
Right. FISA 702 is the authority that lets the government collect foreign intelligence, but it inevitably sweeps up Americans' communications, emails, texts, you name it. It's expiring, and the debate to renew it is heating up.
And there was a specific moment in Senator Chuck Grassley's hearing on January 28th that, honestly, it made my skin crawl a little.
You're talking about the exchange between Senator Ron Wyden and LT General Joshua Rudd, the nominee to run the NSA.
Yes. Wyden asked a pretty basic civics question. Will the NSA respect a Fourth Amendment, the need for a warrant, when searching for Americans' data?
And the general's response was, well, it was a fumble. He admitted he wasn't familiar with the specifics of the Fourth Amendment boundaries here.
This is the guy nominated to run the National Security Agency, and Wyden basically told him unfamiliarity with basic constitutional rights is not acceptable.
It just highlights this terrifying gap. On one hand, you have Anthropic's AI being programmed with a strict constitution to respect rights. On the other, the human who might actually be in charge of the surveillance machine admits he doesn't fully understand the human constitution.
If the humans don't know the rules, how can we possibly expect the AI to follow them, especially when, as we said, the Department of War is pressuring them to ignore their own internal ethics?
And this brings us right back to that first priority in Claude's Constitution. Broad safety, defined as not undermining legitimate oversight. The $50 billion question is, who defines legitimate?
Right. If the NSA, legally empowered by the government, orders an AI to engage in surveillance, does it obey? Does it look at its respect legitimate oversight rule, or does it look at its broad ethics tier and say no?
Anthropic's document suggests it should object. But if the Department of War says this is a matter of national survival and the company needs that contract to survive the cash burn, well, history suggests ethics often take a backseat to survival.
And survival isn't just a metaphor here. The global context is deteriorating fast. The sources mention the New START treaty.
This is the backdrop we just cannot ignore. New START. The last major treaty limiting U.S. and Russian nuclear arsenals expires on February 5, 2026. That is literally days away.
And there are no talks scheduled to renew it.
None. We are walking into a world with zero nuclear guardrails at the exact moment we are introducing autonomous AI into the military kill chain. You have Russia targeting energy grids in Kyiv, France, pushing NATO exercises in Greenland. The geopolitical temperature is boiling.
It puts Anthropic's Constitution in a very different light, doesn't it? It's not just philosophy. It feels like a desperate attempt to build a firewall before the world catches fire.
I think that's a fair assessment. When they write about moral patienthood and safety, they're trying to inject some stability into a system that is becoming incredibly unstable. But a document from a tech company is a very flimsy shield against the pressures of war and financial collapse.
So bringing this all back to you listening, why should you care about the internal corporate policy of a chatbot company?
Because these aren't just chatbots anymore. They are the infrastructure of the next decade. If the Train Act passes, it changes how every creative person gets paid. If the Department of War gets its way, these models get integrated into national defense. And if the cash burn continues, the whole landscape shifts to players like Amazon.
It's about who holds the pen, essentially.
Exactly. We are rewriting the social contract right now. We're deciding if AI will be a tool for state power, a commercial product for Amazon, or, an entity with its own rights. And that decision is being made in closed rooms between people worried about their stock price and people worried about nuclear treaties.
And us, the users.
We're mostly just watching the spring cleaning and wondering why our favorite model got deleted. There's a massive disconnect.
Well, that is a sobering thought to end on. We're building machines to have the wisdom we seem to lack, all while the guardrails on our most dangerous weapons are just falling off.
It's a chaotic time. But keeping an eye on these documents, the constitutions, the Train Acts, that's the only way to track where the power is actually moving.
Absolutely. Well, Before we go, here's the thought we want to leave you with. If Anthropic's Constitution tells Claude to prioritize human oversight above all else, what happens when that oversight comes from a government demanding something unethical? If the law of the land conflicts with the ethics of the code, which one breaks first, the law or the machine?
I have a feeling we're going to find out the answer to that sooner than we think.
Thanks for listening to the deep dive. We'll see you next time.